I'm Vanessa and I work as a biology teacher in the science department, and I've always been interested in diet. So even from a young age, I was that person who gained and lost weight all the time. So last year, always been a bit different. Last year, suddenly I changed a few things and I very quickly dropped about 16 kilos in weight. Wow. And yeah, a lot of people have asked me, how did you do it? And it was this intermittent fasting. So basically, what are the secrets to losing weight? Well, there's loads and loads and loads of information out there, and you hear conflicting evidence all the time. So you'll have heard all of these things before. So which one is it? Well, let's have a little look. So the main fact I'm going to start with is this one that the medical and the scientific community completely disregard, and they take no notice of it at all, because we've always worked with the calories, energy in, energy out, that calories are the thing that make you fat. Now we've been told that for many, 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 many years, but there's lots of evidence, science-based evidence behind this. However, I'll just draw on anecdotal evidence. So if any of you have ever done the Atkins diet, you will know you can eat 5,000 calories a day and you lose weight. So how is that? You're eating fat, you're eating protein, and you lose weight. So straight away, that is the evidence behind the fact that just that on its own, that the calories and the energy in and the energy out hypothesis is not true. So, and the other fact that diet companies know is that on a low-calorie diet, yes, you will lose weight, but you won't keep it off, because what your body will do is it will compensate in terms of, if you've gone without food, you're cold, you feel lethargic, and the rest of it. And what you're doing is you're ruining your metabolic pathways and switching to different ones, and it takes many, 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 many years to get them back on track. But I'll talk about that a little bit in a moment. So it's this idea. Intermittent fasting is all about hormones. Hormones make you fat. Now we know that, again, drawing on anecdotal evidence, if you take the contraceptive pill, we know that estrogen makes you lay down fat. We know that thyroid hormone, a lack of thyroxine, makes you fat. We know that insulin puts glucose basically and puts it into your cells. So we know, just with our everyday evidence, our everyday knowledge, that it's hormones that make you fat. So how have we come so far down this line where we're all convinced that it's calories that make us fat? So if we have a little look, so basically I've said the reduced calorie theory is blown away by the Atkins diet. The scientific and medical communities have chosen to completely ignore that fact and decide to blame you, that you're greedy, you're gluttonous, you have no self-control. Do the slimming and pharmaceutical industries care? No, they really don't, because they're making loads and loads of money out of you. So how did it all come about? So back in the day, it was the sugar industry that funded research, and they wanted to demonise fat, and they wanted to keep sugar up there. So it was a politician, some guy called McGovern, who decided fat is bad and sugar is good. And then, of course, from that, the food industries jumped on board, and they were like, this is fantastic. We can now push certain types of food, and this is where, in the 80s, all the processed foods came in. I've just put that on there because the food pyramid that a lot of people refer back to, who came up with that? It was the US Agriculture Department. They came up with the idea that you should eat more grains. Well, they're going to, because they're going to sell more. So all the things that we're fed all the time in terms of information, we need to start looking at it, because the one thing that is true is that since the 80s, we are fatter than ever. We now have the phrase diabesity. It's not just diabetics, it's obesity as well. And if we're so fat and we're following all this advice and we're eating all these diet foods, how is it happening? So basically, I'll just keep an eye on the time so I can make sure I come full circle with what I want to talk about. So basically, it goes like this. Oh yeah, here's the sugar company. Sugar companies doing their research. So here's a classic example, right? Who feeds their kids this rubbish? Well, I'm sure all of us have fed them at some time or other. But look at this. It's at what point? It's insane. Does feeding this make you think that you're giving your children nutrition, right? It's got the American Heart Association stamp on there. The American Heart Association is saying that it's better to give your child this than an egg in the morning. It's insane. Basically, these companies pay the American Heart Association for the stamp. So the point I'm trying to get to is don't believe everything that you've read, because the other thing is, and again drawing on anecdotal sort of evidence, I went to Texas to Brazil at the weekend. Don't know if you know it, Brazilian restaurant, loads of food, loads of meat. You quickly get full and you're like, you know what, don't even bring me another piece of meat, I can't eat it. But oh, a nice bit of sugary banana or something sweet, yeah. Because there's no cut-off point for that. There's no natural receptor in the body to turn off your desire for that food. Whereas you never get addicted to lamb chops or you never get addicted to a particular steak. Whereas a whole tub of Pringles, woof, I can eat a lot. So let's have a little chat. Oh yeah, the other thing to say is, well, it's not your fault if you're carrying extra weight. These companies are using brain imaging techniques to work out the pleasure centres in your brain when they're messing about with their recipes. So McDonald's was the first one that was famous for that, in terms of working out exactly the amount of sugar, the amount of salt, and the different tastes to make you have an addictive feeling towards these foods. So, by the 1980s, we were all screwed because the media was talking about it, the scientists were talking about it, and all the physicians, all the doctors were very much saying calories in, calories out, and that's it. So what is the actual problem? A lot of it comes from processed food, because when the food industry started clicking on, we can mess about with the food, take fat out, let's stick fructose in. Now fructose is a big problem. When you take it in your fruit, there's only a small amount of it, it's masked by the fibre, and so you don't get this big massive surge. So one of the problems that people do is they try and stay low fat and eat a lot. Fructose isn't good for you either. A fructose molecule is half of a sucrose molecule, and sucrose is that white stuff you put in your tea. So this is what they did. They decided to take the syrup, the sugar from corn, which they can grow cheaply, and they can put the fructose in that to make it extra sweet. But the problem is you end up with a fatty liver. And when you've got a fatty liver, when you eat carbohydrates, you can't process that carbohydrate, because when you've got glucose in your blood system, you need to take it out of your blood, you put it in your liver, or you put it in your muscles. So if you've got a fatty liver, your liver is occupied, less capacity to absorb glucose, glucose persists in the bloodstream, and this is where we start having all the problems with diabetes, because when you've got glucose floating around in your bloodstream, number one, you keep releasing insulin, which is a hormone, and number two, you end up with proteins becoming what they call glycated, and that leads to all the complications with diabetes. Now, this is the main issue now. If you're releasing a lot of insulin into your bloodstream, your receptors for insulin, which takes up the glucose, stop responding. So you downgrade your receptors, and you then release more insulin. But it's like shouting at a child, for instance. This is the analogy that we use. You might shout once and they'll take notice, but if you keep shouting, they just stop listening. So basically what happens then is your insulin encourages your fat cells to take up glucose and convert it to fat. So we could look at more complicated pathways, but I thought I'd treat you to one of my simple ones. There's your liver, right? So intermittent fasting, how does all this lead into intermittent fasting? It leads in because basically what we're saying is you need to allow yourself in a day a period of time where you aren't chucking glucose at your cells. And the reason why is this, and this will also help people lose weight. So in your liver, you've got a glycogen store that's made up from lots and lots of glucose. And it's like a reserve battery. So this is the battery now, imagine it's half full. You've got a little bit of glucose in there. And when you're hungry, your liver will look like that. And what you'll do is you'll go and eat something because you want to stock that back up. So what you're going to do is you're going to eat some food, you're going to get glucose, you're going to stick it in your liver, and your reserves will be full. So later on, when you're hungry, what happens is that glycogen gets broken down, they put the glucose into the bloodstream, and your liver goes back like that. Now, if you then eat every sort of 4 hours, all you're ever doing is accessing your liver. And you're taking the glucose from the glycogen in your liver out, and then you're replenishing it. So you're never, ever, ever accessing your fat stores, because all you're doing is going to your liver, and you'll take what's out, you'll eat, you'll fill it back up. So you could be doing loads and loads of exercise, you can be eating all the right foods, but you're never actually going to access your fat cells unless you cut all the way through the glycogen in your liver. Now, for some people in their lives, that has never ever happened. And when they switch to the fat cells to get energy, they start getting headachy, they don't feel well, but your body soon adjusts to that. So, there's your fat cells. Instead of taking the energy from your liver and putting it in and out, what you're going to do is you fast. Basically, you go for longer than 4 hours. You don't eat food, and you are forced to go to your fat stores. And the fat stores associated with this insulin resistance are the ones that go around your tummy. So basically what we're saying about fasting is every time you eat, you're bashing those insulin receptors. By not eating, they learn to respond better, okay? So they learn to respond to the insulin, so you have less insulin. You're then forced to access your fat stores. So what might intermittent fasting look like? Because people think you have to walk, you have to go for days, you have to go all day without any food. And that's not the case. Dr. Michael Mosley is a prominent scientist. You'll have seen him on the TV. And he came up with the 5-2 diet. Now that was just from his observations. He found that if you eat normally for 5 days, and then 2 days you just reduce to eating twice a day and 2 small snacks, approximately of about 500 calories, then that is the fast that he developed. For me, what I do is if you have your last meal at 6 o'clock in the evening, and then you don't eat till midday the next day, each day you have done an 18-hour fast. And you are resensitizing your insulin receptors to the whole problem of constantly hitting them with glucose. So the other thing is, let's have a little think about the snacking industry. Who said snacks were good? People like Kellogg's and Nestle. Who said breakfast was good? Kellogg's. Actually you don't need to have breakfast. You've just laid on your back for 8 hours, asleep in bed. At what point do you think you need to get up and feed yourself? You don't, right? You can easily do an 18-hour fast, and that helps to realign your receptors. So if I was going to recommend some books or more information on this, the fast diet is excellent. One of the other advantages of the fast diet and fasting, when he made this documentary, it's a Horizon documentary on BBC Two, he was actually investigating what stops us from aging. He was looking for anti-aging cures, and he came across the fast diet because what he found was in Ecuador, there was a group of people called the Lorons, and they lived to about the age of 117. And what it was, when they investigated them, it was a genetic mutation in the way they produce insulin. So it links back to the whole idea. It's hormones that make you fat, not calories. Now it's really, 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 really difficult to get your head around that because we've all been completely brainwashed with it. But if I take you back to that very first statement where we said, well, let's look at the Atkins diet. You can eat 5,000 calories a day of meat and fat. How does that work? The reason why it works is because if you're only putting that in your mouth, you are not releasing insulin and you fix your insulin receptors. And there's one other thing to mention as well. There's evidence that it's the length of time you have been, let's say, abusing your insulin receptors that makes a difference. It takes longer for you to undo that, but everyone has a starting point.
Can I ask a quick question? So
yes.
Basically, you eat your last meal at 6,
yes,
and then you don't eat until lunchtime the following day.
Yeah, and then what I try to do is, like today I've got some smoked salmon, so that's great because I know that won't raise blood glucose at all. So then even if you eat later on in the evening and you have a high carbohydrate meal, you've only spiked your blood glucose once in that day. So it's cutting out the snacking, and it is maybe just eating sort of twice a day. But the main thing is eating exactly what you want so you don't snack. So if I know you've ever tried to lose weight before, you kind of reduce the amount that you're going to eat, you try to be good, but then you're drawn to snacking later on in the evening, and of course that is what's doing this spiking of your blood glucose. So that is intermittent fasting.